It was 7:12 in the morning when my phone rang. I know the exact time because I just set my coffee mug down on the kitchen counter and glanced at the clock above the stove. The way you do when you're not in any rush. Retired. Quiet Tuesday. Nothing on the calendar. The number was my mother's neighbor, Diane. She'd lived 3 doors down from my mother for going on 11 years. Bernard. Her voice was tight. Your mom fell. She's on the floor in the hallway. I heard her through the door when I came to drop off her mail. She can't get up. My mother is 76 years old. She lives alone in the house where I grew up, about 40 minutes north of us, just outside Dayton. She's sharp as a tack, does her own grocery shopping, watches Jeopardy every night, calls me every Sunday at 2 in the afternoon without fail. But she has osteoporosis. Her doctor told us 2 years ago that a fall could mean a hip fracture. That a hip fracture at her age, left unattended, could mean something far worse. I told Diane I was on my way. Hung up. Reached for my keys on the hook by the door. They weren't there. My truck was at the dealership. I'd dropped it off the afternoon before for a brake job. They'd told me it wouldn't be ready until afternoon. My wife's car was sitting in the driveway, a white Lexus SUV she'd had for 3 years, plenty of room. 40 minutes up, load my mother in, 40 minutes to the hospital, 2 hours, maybe a little more. My wife was still upstairs. I could hear the shower running. I went to the bottom of the stairs and called up to her. Told her what happened, told her I needed the car. The shower turned off. A minute passed. Then she appeared at the top of the stairs in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel. I need the car today, she said. I have my book club at 11, and then I'm meeting Lene for lunch. I looked at her. My mother is on the floor. Call an ambulance on the floor. Call an ambulance, Bernard. That's what they're for. I want to be clear about something. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I'd been married to this woman for 22 years, and I already knew in the pit of my stomach, that there was no version of this conversation that ended with her handing me the keys out of genuine concern. That ship had sailed a long time ago. I just hadn't let myself see it clearly until that moment. I said, "You're right." And I walked back into the kitchen. I called 911. Told them my elderly mother had fallen and couldn't get up and might have a hip or pelvic injury. They dispatched an ambulance immediately. Then I called Diane back, told her help was coming, asked her to please stay with my mother until the paramedics arrived. Diane said she'd already let herself in with the spare key and was sitting on the floor next to my mother, holding her hand. That detail. Diane, a woman who barely knew my mother beyond borrowed cups of sugar and Christmas cards, sitting on the floor holding her hand, while my wife was upstairs deciding which restaurant she wanted for lunch. I called a neighbor 2 streets over, a guy I'd known for years, and he drove me to the hospital. No hesitation, just grabbed his jacket and said, "Let's go." My mother had fractured her hip, right femoral neck. The ER doctor, a young woman who spoke to me with more patience than I deserved, given how disheveled I must have looked, explained that this was a common injury in falls for women my mother's age, and that they would need to operate a partial hip replacement. She said the sooner the better. I sat in that waiting room for 4 hours. My wife texted once around noon. "How is she?" 2 words. I typed back, "Surgery." She replied with a thumbs up emoji. A thumbs up emoji. I stared at that screen for a long time. Here's the thing about a marriage going wrong slowly. You don't see it all at once. It happens the way a house settles, a crack in the foundation here, a draft under the door there, and you keep telling yourself it's fine, it's normal, all old houses do this. You patch it. You move furniture over the bad spots. You stop inviting people over so they don't notice. My wife and I had been doing that for years. I see it now. I couldn't see it then, or I could, but I chose not to. We'd met when I was 38. I was a civil engineer with the county. She was working in hospital administration. Smart, funny, organized in a way I found reassuring after years of bachelor chaos. We got married after 2 years together. No children from either of us, which was fine. We had a good life on paper, nice house in a good neighborhood outside Dayton, 2 cars, vacations every other year. She had her friends, I had mine, and we had enough overlap to feel like a partnership. But something had shifted in the last 5 or 6 years. I couldn't always put a name to it. She became less interested in the things we used to share. Dinners out became events she tolerated. Visits to my mother became obligations she fulfilled begrudgingly. She started spending more clothes, spa days, weekend trips with her girlfriends that I wasn't invited to and didn't ask about because I'd learned that asking created arguments. I told myself it was the empty nest phase, even though we'd never had a nest. I told myself people change. I told myself I wasn't the easiest person to live with either. The morning my mother fell, something inside me stopped making excuses. My mother came through surgery well. The doctor said the procedure went cleanly and that with proper physical therapy she had every reason to expect a full recovery. She'd need to stay in a hospital for a few days and then go to a rehabilitation facility for a few weeks before she could safely return home. I drove back to the house that evening in a borrowed car. My truck was still at the dealership. My wife was in the living room watching television when I came in. She looked up and asked how my mother was. She fractured her hip, I said. She had surgery. She's stable. That's good. She turned back to the TV. I stood there in the doorway for a moment. Then I said, I need to figure out her care plan. Rehab facility, physical therapy, modifications to her house. It's going to take some time, and it's going to cost money. How much money? I don't know yet. We have savings. We'll figure it out. She looked at me then with an expression I didn't recognize immediately. It took me a second to place it. She wasn't concerned. She wasn't calculating. She was annoyed. We've been putting money aside for the Scottsdale trip, she said. The Scottsdale trip was something she'd been planning for the following spring. Her idea, a golf resort in Arizona. I'd agreed to it months ago when things between us had felt more stable. My mother needs care, I said. Your mother has Medicare. I didn't say anything else that night. I ate the leftovers in the fridge, standing over the kitchen sink, and then I went upstairs and I lay in the bed we'd shared for 20 years, and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about the way Diane had sat down on the floor because that was where my mother was, and she wasn't going to make my mother come up to a level. The next morning, I started making calls. I found a rehabilitation facility 20 minutes from our house with strong ratings on Medicare's comparison tool. I arranged transport. I spoke to my mother's primary care doctor about what to expect during recovery. I contacted a home modification company about installing grab bars and a walk-in shower for when she returned home. All of it during a single morning from the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee. My wife came downstairs around 10, poured herself coffee, looked at my notes. You're doing a lot. She's my mother. I know who she is. That was the whole conversation. I want to be honest about this next part, because I think it matters. I was not a perfect husband. I worked long hours for most of our marriage. I was not always present. I sometimes chose the path of least resistance when I should have pushed for real conversations. I am not writing this to make myself the hero of a story where I had no flaws. That would be dishonest, but there is a difference between imperfect and indifferent. There is a difference between not being your best self and sitting at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe and telling a man that his elderly mother on the floor isn't your problem. I started paying attention after that. Carefully. 3 weeks after my mother's fall, I was reviewing our joint bank account online, something I'd done only sporadically for years, because my wife handled most of the household finances. It was an arrangement I'd been comfortable with. She was organized, detail-oriented, and I trusted her. I'd been depositing my pension and my part-time consulting income into our shared account for 3 years since I retired. What I found took me a long time to process. Over the preceding 14 months, there had been a series of transfers, not large ones, not at first. 300 here, 500 there, to an account I didn't recognize. Then in the past 6 months, they'd gotten larger. 2,000, 3,500. The most recent one, made 11 days before my mother fell, was for $8,000. In total, over 14 months, 41,000 and change had moved from our joint account to somewhere I had never seen before. I didn't confront her that day. I know that might seem strange, but I'm 63 years old, and I spent 30 years as an engineer. And what that work taught me is that you do not act on incomplete data. You gather first, you confirm, you document, then you act. I called my accountant the next morning and told him what I'd found. He recommended a family law attorney he trusted. I had an appointment by the end of that week. The attorney, a calm, methodical woman who I appreciated precisely because she showed no dramatic reaction to anything I told her, explained my options clearly. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. Marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally, based on factors including duration of the marriage, contribution of each spouse, and misconduct. The financial transfers, she said, was something she'd want a forensic accountant to examine. I hired both. I said nothing to my wife. I came home every evening. I made dinner sometimes. I asked how her day was. She told me. We watched television. On Sundays, I visited my mother at the rehab facility and brought her the crossword puzzle books she liked and sat with her for a couple of hours while she asked me how I was really doing, the way only a mother can ask that. I told her I was handling it. "You've always handled things quietly," she said one afternoon, not looking up from her puzzle. "Even when you were small, you'd go off somewhere and you'd figure it out, and then you'd come back when it was done." Is that a compliment? She looked up then and smiled. Mostly. The forensic accountant found the account. It was in my wife's name only, opened roughly 16 months ago at a credit union across town. The $41,000 was there, plus what appeared to be contributions from a separate source, income I hadn't known about. She had been doing freelance consulting work, billing under her own name, which she was entitled to do. But the combination of the hidden account and the consistent transfers from our joint savings told a clear story. She had been preparing to leave for over a year. My attorney filed the divorce petition on a Thursday morning in April. My wife was served at 11:30 that same day at the restaurant where she was having lunch. I didn't plan the timing. My attorney did. I won't pretend there wasn't some satisfaction in knowing she was caught off guard in the same way my mother was left on that floor, unexpectedly, without warning, needing to figure it out herself. I'm not proud of that feeling, but I'm not going to lie about it either. She called me 17 times between noon and 4 o'clock that afternoon. I let every single one go to voicemail. I was sitting with my mother at the rehab facility at the time, helping her practice the exercises her physical therapist had assigned. My mother didn't ask why my phone kept buzzing. She just handed me another crossword puzzle and said, "Your turn." When I finally listened to the voicemails that evening, they followed a predictable arc. The first few were disbelief. The middle ones were anger. By the last few, something else had crept into her voice, something I hadn't heard in years: urgency. The kind that comes from realizing that the situation is real and the person you expected to manage it is no longer available. I texted her back at 7 that evening. "Please communicate through the attorneys going forward." That was the last personal message I sent her. The divorce took 8 months. These things rarely move quickly. There was negotiation over the house. We'd owned it jointly for 18 years, and its value had increased significantly. There was the matter of the hidden account. There was her consulting income. There were retirement accounts that needed to be evaluated. In the end, I kept the house. She received a fair portion of its appraised value. The hidden account transfers were factored into the settlement in my favor. I won't share the exact numbers because they don't matter as much as the principle, which my attorney articulated clearly and which the opposing counsel ultimately did not contest. You cannot quietly drain a joint account for over a year and expect that to be treated as ordinary behavior in dissolution proceedings. My mother completed her physical therapy. She is back in her own home. I installed the grab bars myself over a long weekend in July. She made me lunch both days and complained that I was being overprotective, which meant she was fully herself again. I drive up every other Sunday now. We do the crossword. She beats me more often than I'll admit. I am still in the house where I spent most of my adult life. Some people have asked me whether it feels strange to be there without her. Honestly, no. It felt strange when she was there. But something essential had already left the building. Now it just feels like mine. I've been asked, including by a few friends who knew us both, whether I saw it coming. The answer I've landed on is this: I saw something. I couldn't name it or I didn't want to. There's a kind of willful blindness that long marriages can produce, where you've invested so much that seeing clearly feels too costly. You keep not seeing because the alternative is too large to deal with on any given Tuesday. And then one Tuesday your phone rings at 7:12 in the morning, and a neighbor is sitting on the floor next to your mother and your wife is upstairs deciding where she wants to have lunch, and the willful blindness runs out. The painful part was never the money. The painful part was the accounting of years. How many of them had been real? How many had been performance? And at what point did the performance replace the thing it was imitating? I don't have a clean answer to that. I suspect I never will. What I know is this. My mother is home. The grab bars are solid. I checked each one 3 times. The divorce is final. The accounts are mine. And every Sunday at 2 o'clock, my phone rings and I pick it up, and it's her, and she asks me how I'm doing, and I tell her the truth. I'm doing fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. I think I finally figured it out. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened that Tuesday morning. Not just what my wife said, or what I found in the bank statements, or how the divorce played out. I mean what was really happening underneath all of it, for years, that I kept choosing not to look at directly. Here's what I've come to believe. The way a person behaves in a moment they think doesn't matter. That's who they are. My wife didn't think that morning mattered. My mother was on the floor, 40 minutes away, and she calculated the inconvenience against her book club and came up with an answer in about 30 seconds. That calculation didn't happen for the first time that morning. It had been running quietly in the background of our marriage for a long time. I just hadn't been paying attention to the output. Diane sat down on the floor next to my mother because that was where my mother was. She didn't wait. She didn't negotiate. She just got down on the floor. I think about that a lot. The difference between those two women in that single hour tells you almost everything you need to know about character. Not character as a concept, but character as the accumulation of small choices made when no one is breeding you. I spent a lot of years being what I'd call passively decent. I worked hard. I didn't cause trouble. I kept the peace. I told myself that was enough. What I've learned is that passive decency is not the same as integrity. Integrity requires you to look at things clearly even when looking is uncomfortable. It requires you not to move furniture over the cracks in the foundation and call the house sound. The moment I stopped looking away, when I sat down at that kitchen table with a legal pad and started making calls, things started to move in the right direction, not because the universe rewarded me for finally waking up. There's no cosmic scorekeeper handing out prizes. Things moved because I finally stopped being passive. I gathered information. I made decisions based on what was actually true rather than what was convenient to believe. I protected my mother. I protected myself. Action has consequences, and so does inaction. I've been experiencing the consequences of inaction for years without connecting them to the choice that produced them. There is something I want to say about the anger, because I did feel it. When I listened to those 17 voicemails, part of me felt something close to satisfaction. I'm not going to dress that up. But I also know that satisfaction faded within a day or two, and what replaced it was something quieter and more useful, a kind of clarity, not bitterness. Clarity. The difference matters. Bitterness keeps you tangled in what someone else did to you. Clarity just shows you where you are and what you need to do next. My mother is back in her house. The grab bars I installed haven't moved an inch. The divorce is final. Every Sunday at 2 she calls, and I pick up, and she asks how I'm really doing. I tell her the truth every time. That's new for me. It turns out the truth is easier to carry than the alternative.